to our Gold Star families and our fallen heroes. We're gonna, yeah, exactly. We're gonna start today off by welcoming the Manituck Post 8075, our Prospect VFW, to post our colors, and Erica Farrell, Miss New Haven County 2019, to sing our national anthem. So if everyone will please rise.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
And now it's my pleasure to welcome Mr. Raymond Fleischer for our invocation.
Good afternoon. Please bow your heads. We're going to pray. Dear gracious Lord, Heavenly Father, thank you for this wonderful, beautiful day, Lord. Lord, and thank you for this group that has is organized and well planned, Lord. And Lord, I thank you that they almost come off like they're military there, Lord, and I thank you for them. I thank you for all these volunteers. I thank you for everything they've done. I thank you for the many people that have gave their lives for this nation, Lord. And this flag and still stands for freedom, Lord. Lord, I thank you for everything you've done for each and every one, Lord, and I ask your blessing upon all those families that have had losses and those that have been injured in service to this country, dear Lord. Lord, I thank you for everything you bestowed upon us. Lord, I thank you for the sacrifice of each and every one of these families and their children. Lord, I thank you for your son's sacrifice, Lord, also. And Lord, I thank you that you have given us our salvation, Lord. And Thank you for this freedom and that our flag is still flying free. I pray this all in Jesus' name. Amen.
I would now like to welcome our longest-serving mayor in Connecticut since 1977, Mayor Robert Chatfield.
To our fallen heroes, to our Gold Star families, brother and sister veterans, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you all to a perfect day in the town of Prospect. Welcome you all to Prospect. I just want to tell you a little story. I served my term in the Air Force from October 61 to October 65. I was stationed at 1962 to 65 at Spangdahlem Air Force Base in Germany. Had a new roommate come in. His name was Bob Sunset. And all Bob knew that his dad, who died in the Second World War, whom he never knew, was stationed someplace in a military cemetery in Europe. Well, for the next several weekends, we went looking for his dad in as many cemeteries that we could get to. Obviously, there were none in Germany, so we had to go to other countries. We finally found him up in Holland. He went over to the grave. He knelt. Two other friends were with him. We stood back, went outside the cemetery, got him some flowers, put him on his dad's stone. About 2 weeks later, a diplomat from Holland came to the main gate with a sealed pouch for Airman Sunset. He was called to the office, the commander's office, and when he opened up the sealed envelope, was another envelope inside from the Queen, Queen Beatrice, inviting him to the Memorial Day services that May. So the three of us that went with him went there. He sat up on the dais with the royal family, and the rest of us were scattered amongst the crosses. And when the flyover came, it was the F-105, so my Air Base, that kind of brought a little home to it. So that's maybe when I found patriotism, or maybe before, but to the ladies and gentlemen we're honoring today and all the other heroes, thank you, and thank you for coming to Prospect.
And our keynote speaker today will be Chief Warrant Officer 3, Russell Allen.
So first, I'd like to thank the Gold Star members, families, for your sacrifice. Many people don't understand that when your loved one joins the military, you also incur that military duty, because I don't know how many people have spent many years away from their family. I counted my time over my 32 years of service, and I've spent almost 10 years away from my family. And my wife and my kids, my mother, my father, they've all suffered. They've all wondered where I've been through my tours in Afghanistan. They have all suffered. And to pay the ultimate sacrifice, I'm honored and humbled to be here to speak with you. So I'm really not known for being very politically correct, but I don't apologize for that, okay? Thank you. How many infantry people we have here? Okay, so I'm going to tell you a story. In 2003, I was in Afghanistan. I was working at the CJ-6 in Bagram. And the commander came to me and said, "Hey, Sergeant Allen, we need you to go up to Orkney to repair some communications equipment." I said, "Okay." So at the time in 2003, Afghanistan was very underdeveloped. We had only been there a little less than a year. And so I got on a Black Hawk with my equipment and we went out to Orkney. When we got there, it was pretty much just dirt, wire, and a fob, and a couple of tents. So if you've ever been, who's been in Afghanistan? Okay, so in Afghanistan, it's very cold up towards the Hindu Kush. It's a beautiful country, but it gets cold. So I'm out there repairing the equipment, and I'm shaking and I'm kind of cold, and the infantry guys are like, "Hey, Sarnellen, you can come over here and spoon with us." I was like, "Nah, I'm not that cold yet." So, I just want to let you guys know, a lot of you don't know me, I am a son of Connecticut. I was born in Derby, I was raised in Milford, and 12 days after I graduated high school, I joined the Army, and that's where I've been ever since. So today, we hear a lot of controversy over the flag. And growing up in the 70s and the 80s, there was no controversy over the flag. So I'd really like to talk about how we can honor our Gold Star families, our fallen comrades. And I want to speak about the flag today and what it means. Our flag is not a political statement. It is not a political group. It is not a race. It is not a gender or a sexual orientation. Our flag is a representation of what is good in this country. Excuse me. It is an ideology for which this country stands for. It is a symbol of hope for people in other countries who are oppressed and someday want to come to enjoy the freedoms many of us take for granted. I'm sorry.
Don't apologize.
When I see our flag, it has meaning to me. It says to me that I'm never going to forsake you. I'm never going to leave you. I'm going to be here through the hard times, and I'm going to make sure you get through those hard times. This country was founded on godly principles, and our flag is married to that. Each time we would go to Afghanistan, I've served 2 tours, and you do a lot of convoying in Afghanistan. And when we come back from convoy, I would see our flag in the distance when we were coming up to our camp. And it just gave me such a sense of safety, a sense of pride. It told me, it said everything is going to be okay. You know, our flag is not here to separate us. Our flag is here to bring us together for the common good of every person in this nation. And many people who didn't grow up during the Cold War era don't understand that patriotism. When you look at that flag, it gives you the inspiration for when you need to be called upon for the injustice of the world to help them out. That's what that flag is there for. It is our veterans, our service members, and their service that makes this country great. Our flag is made to honor the sacrifices that have been made for this country. If you look at our flag, you have 50 white stars on a blue background representing our 50 states. You have 13 alternating red and white stripes, which represent the 13 original colonies. And each color has a meaning. Red is hardness and valor. White is purity and innocence. And blue is preservation, justice, and perseverance. When a Gold Star family receives a flag, it also has meaning. The first fold represents life. The second fold is our belief in eternal life. And the third fold is to honor and remember our veterans who are departing our ranks for the time they gave in service to help this country and protect the world. So, to the Gold Star families and your loved ones, on September 11th, 2019, I really felt I came to understand how we could honor you. We need to act as we did on September 12th, 2001, as Americans. Thank you.
We're going to invite up Connecticut Fallen Heroes volunteer and former Miss Connecticut from 2003, Marlo.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here to speak on behalf of these three very brave gentlemen. I'm first going to start with Master Sergeant, United States Army retired Frank Lewandowski. Frank was born in Chicago, the Chicago, Illinois area, and entered the United States Army in 1964 at the ripe age of 18. He served for 23 years and retired as a Master Sergeant E8. He served in Vietnam in 1969 and then again in 1972. Frank was also a crew member on the same aircraft that took Ralph Cianotti's life, who we will be personally remembering here today. Ironically, just 1 month shy of 50 years exactly to the day of that fatal crash. In 1972, he was a crew member on another helicopter, but in the last moment, he was replaced by one of his mechanics. Just 7 minutes later, news came that that helicopter had been taken down by a shoulder-fired heat-seeking missile, killing everyone aboard. Mr. Lewandowski, all of us here today would like to say thank you for your service to our great country. Please come on up. I'll just take a quick moment. You'll see that each of the people being honored here and the families who are being acknowledged are given a very special quilt by our quilters, and so they're all made with love and so much time and attention, especially created for you. So thanks to our quilters. The next person that I would like to recognize, Specialist 5, United States Army retired, Dr. Charles Mcnair. Dr. Mcnair was born March 6, 1949 in San Diego, California. He enlisted in the United States Army in September 1968 and was discharged in September 1971. Trained as a field medic and operating room technician at duty stations at the 45th Surgical Hospital, Tay Ninh, Vietnam, from June 1969 to June 1970. And at the 8th Evacuation Hospital, Fort Ord, California, from June 1970 to September 1971. He attended public schools right through his first years at the University of Riverside from September to 1971 to August 1973. He then went on to attend the University of California Medical School from September 1974 to June 1978. Dr. Mcnair would then move to Connecticut in July of 1978 and took up residency at Waterbury Hospital, the Yale program. He practiced internal medicine in Woodbury, Connecticut, and retired in September of 2016. He married Jen, and they had, he married Jean, and they had three, sorry about that. Whoops. I apologize, Jean. Let me just make that real clear. He married Jean, and they had 3 children and 2 grandchildren. He self-published Soldiers of a Foreign War, a novel of Vietnam, in September of 2018. Dr. Mcnair, all of us here gathered today would like to say thank you for your service to our country. Please come on up and be honored. Thank you so much for your service. And not that it's not very special to be able to stand up here and speak on behalf of these other two gentlemen. However, the next person that I get to honor is someone who I know a little bit personally. I don't know why I'm getting emotional. It was the keynote speaker. You got me, and I've been trying to hold it together. You know, wrong name, but he's someone that I know personally, and I'm really honored to be able to speak on his behalf and share his story. This is Staff Sergeant Retired Oyarma Tate Sr. He was in the United States Army Air Force. 19-year-old Oyarma was inducted into the United States Army on January 25th, 1943, at Camp Robinson, located in Arkansas. After finishing basic training at Jefferson Barracks, Missouri, he was sent to Fort Belvoir, Virginia, where he studied aircraft maintenance for 4 weeks. He then was sent to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, where he joined the 849th Aviation Battalion of the 10th Air Force. Here he was given a combat outfit and equipment and worked storing materials and equipment labeled for shipping. 3 weeks later, he was sent to Camp Kilmer in New Jersey for intensive combat training. After another 4 weeks, he boarded the Queen Elizabeth, which carried him and his fellow soldiers out of New York for a zigzagging, sub-dodging, 60-day voyage to Bombay, India. There they traveled by train to Calcutta and by convoy to where the Burma Road began. The Burma Road enables the troops to get heavy equipment wherever needed. This corner of Asia was designated as the China-Burma-India Theater of War. That's where the hardships began. Steady monsoon rains aggravated a period lasting for months. Dodging minefields, Japanese sniper fire, malaria, and dysentery from food and fatigue. The battalion was divided into many groups with special assignments, with just a few men assigned to each group. Oyarma served a whopping 30 months in the China-Burma-India Theater of War and was awarded the Bronze Star for his actions there. One such mission was to cut through the very dense jungle in Burma so that the quartermaster trucks could get heavy equipment, fuel, supplies, parts, mules, and men over the Himalayas. Thousands of soldiers, mostly young boys, accepted their task with pride, even though the older fellows often had to help them get through the fright and the hardships that they endured. To this day, Oyarma still believes that the China-Burma-India Theater was one of the most difficult theaters of war and had the least number of men, with approximately 250,000, to defend America's struggle for peace and freedom against Imperial Japan. The largest group to which Oyarma was assigned was the headquarters group. Their mission was to build airstrips, maintain and defend them in a relatively small area. They needed to protect and serve the P-51 fighter planes, which were so important at that time. The aircrafts were designed to escort the bombardment squadrons. Oyarma's job was to fuel and arm them with ammunition, along with doing minor repairs when needed. Originally, he was in a company composed of practically all Afro-American soldiers, but because of the enormous number of casualties, the battalion was integrated. In Shabuang, Burma, where the fighting was very heavy, General Stilwell assigned a battalion of white soldiers and several companies of Chinese infantrymen to his battalion. Oyarma suffered from malaria, which developed into blackwater fever and was hit with shrapnel from a bridge he was welding. He received more shrapnel from the equipment on an airstrip during a dogfight. Both feet were split open at the bottoms from standing in the water in the foxholes, and it took many weeks at the base hospital to heal. Because of his service-related injuries, he now goes to the Veterans Hospital in West Haven, Connecticut. Unfortunately, his military records were destroyed in a fire at the Federal Records Center in Missouri. Thus, he was never able to document his injuries and receive the Purple Heart. But Oyarma loves his country and is proud to have had the opportunity to serve. All of us here would like to say thank you for your service to our great country. You might be wondering where his framed P-51 plane is. Let's just say, the mail does not always serve us well, and we have been waiting for over 4 weeks for this to come. The prints are coming from England, and so that just means Mike and I get to come and visit you and Mrs. Tate and deliver it personally.
I would also like to take this moment to ask any veterans or active military members to please stand up for a round of applause, because we also have so much appreciation for you and your sacrifices as well. Personally remembering some of our fallen heroes. The first would be Specialist 4 Ralph Sinati, and I'd like to welcome his sister Susan up to speak a few words on his behalf.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here today to pay tribute to this year's honorees. And special thanks to everyone responsible for making this event happen. Sponsors, donors, and volunteers, especially Mike Mastroni for all their efforts throughout the year. And thank you for allowing me this opportunity to tell you a little bit about our brother as a person. I am one of 3 sisters of Specialist 4 Ralph S. Sinati, affectionately known as Ralphie. He was one of the only son of parents who emigrated from Italy at a young age. Our parents grew up during the Depression and married after my father returned home from serving in the Army during World War II. We were a typical working class family. Our parents' priorities for us were to get a good education and to become good citizens. Their role was to feed, clothe, shelter, and most importantly, to protect us. They worked hard and they did the best they could to accomplish this. We didn't have much money, but we had our Catholic faith, and we were blessed with family, friends, and neighbors who enriched our lives. As kids, our lives were simple. Without a family car, our activities were limited. Yet Ralph learned to play the trumpet in grammar school and was on the track team in high school. A typical day consisted of school, homework, dinner, and going out to play in the neighborhood. Going out to play seems to be unheard of now, but it was our favorite pastime. We developed close relationships with the neighborhood kids who became our dear friends. We also had special bonds with our extended family. Every Sunday, we attended church in the morning, and the rest of the day, we enjoyed the company of our grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. Ralph was well loved, as is evident by the support he has here today. Our parents, aunts, and uncles have all passed on, but Ralph's nephews and nieces, whom he had never met, are here today, along with several friends and cousins from all over the United States. Ralph had a warm smile and a kind heart, but without a doubt, his greatest attribute was his sense of humor. He was the cool kid with a quick wit and was always the jokester. Ralph was never crazy about school, and on the first day of kindergarten, he was reluctant to go. Since we passed our church as we walked to school, our mother thought it would be helpful for them to stop in to say a prayer. So they did. When they left church, she asked Ralph, "Did you pray to God?" He answered, "Yes." She asked, "What did God tell you?" Ralph replied, "God told me I should go back home." Needless to say, our mother saw it that Ralph went to school. Ralph did finish school, and he graduated from Central High School in Bridgeport in 1966 and continued on to Norwalk Tech. After graduation, one of his goals was to buy a sports car. Our mother, being very protective, was totally against the sports car. She worried that Ralph would be killed in a car crash. So he settled for a full-size Chevy convertible, and everyone was happy for a short while. By 1968, Ralph was working for the U.S. Postal Service. He started thinking about settling down, but was drafted that year. He could have enlisted in either the Army or the Navy. He chose the Army, so he could be home in 2 years. In January of 1969, Ralph reported for basic training at Fort Dix. Later that spring, he was sent to Fort Eustis, Virginia, to learn to repair helicopters. It seemed like a good fit for him, as he enjoyed taking things apart and sometimes putting them back together. On May 25th, he spent his 21st birthday, his last birthday, at home with us. By June, he had finished his helicopter repair course, and in July, while men were preparing to walk on the moon, Ralph was on his way to Vietnam to begin his tour of duty. He was assigned to the 15th Medical Battalion in the maintenance platoon to work on helicopters. Ralph apparently continued his antics in the service. His Army buddies appropriately described him as the class clown, always making people laugh and having a good time. They remember him as the guy who always volunteered to do the dangerous job no one else wanted to do, testing rotor blades by balancing them so they wouldn't vibrate. It involved holding a pole with heavy rotor blades spinning at a high rate of speed. Ralph did this without ever flinching. He was well liked by his fellow soldiers and described by his superiors as being cheerful and efficient in performing his duties. From Vietnam, Ralph frequently wrote home assuring us of his safety. He typically wrote, "Mom, I'm okay. Tell everyone I said hi. Mom, I'm still okay." He was always optimistic and upbeat. The last of his letters arrived after we were notified of his death. On October 28, 1969, Ralph was aboard a helicopter doing a maintenance run. The helicopter crashed during a storm and went into flames near the Song Bay Bridge in Phu Vinh. Ralph was killed in the crash. And I wonder, in that moment of the crash, if Ralph once again prayed to God. This time God took him home. Our family was initially of the understanding that all the servicemen on the flight were killed. We believed this for 40 years. But in 2009, with the help of the internet, we learned the chilling details of the accident and that there were 2 survivors. One of them, Steve DeAndre, has since passed a few years ago. Happily, Frank Lewandowski, who you met earlier, Ralph Sargent, is with us today, and you will be hearing from him next. Thank you.
Speak on behalf of Ralph Sinani, I'd like to welcome up Frank Lewandowski once more.
Let me start by first saying survivor's guilt is still real strong. I want to thank Susan for her invitation. She wrote me last, oh, I'm sorry. Susan wrote me last January, I believe, and asked me to come up here and speak on Ralph's behalf. And I have to tell you, it took me a while to answer and finally decide to come on up here.
Real close.
Okay?
There we go.
All right. I was the non-commissioned officer in charge of aircraft maintenance at 15th Med Battalion. Ralph actually worked 2 levels from me in the sense that he was on a maintenance team. We had 2 6-man maintenance teams that had E5s in charge of the teams, and I, of course, was in charge of all the maintenance, and had myself and another staff sergeant who inspected everything the people did. I didn't get to enjoy Ralph's antics, partly because I was the boss and it was frowned upon. But I did get to see his work, and it was good, as was everyone's in the unit. One of the things I am most proud of, and didn't find out for a while, 5 months after the crash, I was still in the hospital in San Diego. One of my most senior mechanics who worked for me back then rotated back to the States, came to see me at Balboa Naval Hospital, and had videos, which I knew he had, of every aircraft crash that we went on. So in 7 months and 29 days, I turned in 28 aircraft for battle damage. I never turned one in because it crashed because of maintenance. And for all you folks in here, and I saw several of them in here earlier today as I was walking around, aircraft take an awful lot of maintenance and an awful lot of inspections, and you sure hope everybody does right. And I have to tell you, that team that I worked with, Ralph worked with, I am most proud of. It's probably about the greatest thing I can ever say about anybody or anything. And I'm just very, very fortunate that I got to work with all these people. They were really great. I also want to let you know that as a part of Ralph's service, when he, as a part of his service, his decorations or medals include the Bronze Star Medal, the Army Good Conduct Medal, the Vietnam Service Ribbon with a Bronze Star, the Vietnam Campaign Ribbon, the Military Merit Medal, and of course his expert badge in automatic rifles and his marksman badge in the rifle, with just a rifle. I sure wish, I know everybody's 50 years is a long time, and yet as I stand here, it was only yesterday. But I thank you all very, very much. for a chance to honor him at this time. Thanks again.
Please, loved ones and family, please step forward.
Careful.
To the Sonati family, it's very, very unusual for the three of us who make quilts for the foundation to actually have personal connection to the family that receives our quilt. I don't know if any of you remember, but in your neighborhood there was a family named the D'Amicos who were in your neighborhood. And Annette D'Amico Rogers is the maker of this quilt for you. She remembers your brother. She remembers him being their postman, and she was very, very honored this year to be able to make this quilt for your family and to have you know the personal connection that comes along with it.
So on behalf of the Warrant Officer Association and the U.S. Army, I'd like to present them with a coin for the service of their fallen loved ones.
So now we would like to personally remember Corporal Fergus F. Connors, Jr., and he's going to be represented by Audrey Brady, our Sikorsky Vice President.
Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you all for taking the time here to be today to remember the lives and legacies of our fallen heroes. I'm honored to have been asked to speak with you and appreciate you joining me in ensuring that these men and their families did not sacrifice in vain. My name is Audrey Brady, and I'm the Vice President of Commercial Systems and Services at Sikorsky, a Lockheed Martin company. Sikorsky is headquartered in Stratford, Connecticut, and has operated in the state for more than 95 years. Sikorsky helicopters are currently flying in support of every branch of the United States military, and more than 20% of Lockheed Martin's workforce is comprised of military veterans. At Sikorsky and Lockheed Martin, we are committed to supporting veterans and their families and giving back to those who so selflessly sacrifice for us. This includes our active participation in events like this, where we pay tribute to fallen warriors who are willing to give their lives so that you and I may live freely. Today, I ask that you join me in taking a few moments to remember one of our fallen, Corporal Fergus F. Connors, Jr., a soldier in the United States Army from Stamford, Connecticut, who laid down his life on June 11, 1967, in the midst of the Vietnam War. Fergus Francis Connors Jr., or Fergie, as he was known by family and friends who are represented here today, was born in Stamford on December 20th, 1946 to May and Fergus Connors, a World War II veteran. He has a brother, Robert, Bob, who works with us at Sikorsky, represented by Judy. He's in our thoughts and prayers for a speedy recovery. He's sitting on her lap is Owen Fergus, middle name Fergus. And his sister Kathleen, who's here with us today, was the oldest of the three. A natural athlete, Fergie spent much of his time playing baseball and football in the neighborhood sandlots at Belltown Park. Though he was only 165 pounds, his brother Robert recalls he took down a lot of huge guys on the football field. He was tough. Fergie attended Ripplewam High School in Stamford and graduated in 1964. His yearbook photo that time shows a handsome young man with a stylish pompadour. His senior profile describes him as a quiet, easygoing, and not easily ruffled. Fergie had a sense of humor. One quote attributed to him in the yearbook reads, "2:28, the time the school day ended, the very best time of the day." After graduation, Fergie worked for Electrolux until April 1966, when he enlisted in the Army. After completing basic training at Fort Dix in New Jersey, where my father was enlisted as well, almost a decade earlier as a medic, he signed up with the U.S. Army Special Forces, the Green Berets, but was denied because he was too young. He then decided to become a paratrooper and went to jump school at Fort Benning. I don't know why, his brother Bob has said, but he loved jumping out of planes. Corporal Connors arrived in Vietnam in November 1966 and was a member of the 2nd Battalion, 327th Infantry, 101st Airborne, and he was stationed throughout the Central Highlands. He wrote home regularly, often including 2 letters in one envelope. The first was addressed to his parents, in which he reassured them he was safe and in good spirits, and the second was specially addressed to his younger brother, Bob. On May 11, 1967, Connors Battalion landed in Duc Pho outside of Da Nang Air Force Base in Quang Ngai Province as part of an airmobile assault on enemy forces called Operation Manor. They were there to neutralize North Vietnamese Army and Viet Cong camps in the area and to protect the American troops stationed nearby from insurgent attacks. After evacuating villagers and their cattle to safety, the 2nd 327th spent the better part of the month clashing with the 1st and 2nd Viet Cong regiments. The terrain was a mixture of canopy jungle, rolling hills, scrub forest, and cultivated lowlands, all of which Connors' company navigated during their patrols, day and night raids, and ambushes. After a brief respite, Connors and his company were sent back to Duc Pho in June in the 2nd phase of the mission. On June 11, 1967, during one of these search and destroy missions, Connors was hit 3 times by enemy fire. He was 20 years old. About 6 months after Corporal Connors' death, his family received an unexpected knock at the door at their home in Connecticut. A fellow soldier, one of Fergie's 22nd Battalion, 327th Infantry, 101st Airborne comrades, recently home from Vietnam, had driven all the way up from Michigan to personally pay his respects. Fergie's brother recalls, the guy had been shipped from Germany to Vietnam with 6 months left in his service, and they didn't even train him properly. He told us that when he got there, my brother taught him what he needed to know to survive. He came all the way out there to tell us how much he owed my brother. I can't help but feel humbled and awed by the enormity of what Corporal Connors must have faced as a young soldier in Vietnam. Unfortunately, he's one of many brave veterans who didn't make it home. We're here today to honor him and the countless others who courageously gave their lives to defend our liberties. Please join me in a moment of silence in remembrance of the American heroes who we've lost. And please also take a moment to think about our Gold Star families who have also sacrificed so much. To those of you who have served or are currently serving in our nation's armed forces, we thank you. Thank you for dedicating your days to defending our freedom, for keeping us and our homeland safe, and for selflessly acting in support of the American values that we hold so dear. Thank you for being willing to give your lives so that so many of us may live in freedom. Thank you for putting us first. At Sikorsky and Lockheed Martin, we keep soldiers such as Corporal Connors in our thoughts and in our hearts, and we never forget who we're working for. Defending our nation, supporting our heroes, and saving lives is the core of what we do. Our founder, Igor Sikorsky, once said, "The work of the individual still remains the spark that moves mankind ahead." Today, and every day, I ask that you remember our fallen heroes, men and women like young Corporal Connors, who are the spark and who made the ultimate sacrifice. Because of people like them, we live freely in America today. Thank you.
Thank you. You did a wonderful job. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Yes, I will. Thank you.
Well, one of you grab the clip. Nope. Okay.
Our next fallen hero we'd like to honor is Private Eugene Mansell, and he's represented by our Vietnam veteran, Dr. Charles Mcnair.
Thank you very much. It is my honor to be addressing you today about Eugene Mansell, who was killed in action on June 19, 1968, while on patrol with Company C, 2nd Platoon, 1st of the 27th Infantry of the 25th Division, known as the Wolfhounds. Eugene was one of 11 children raised mainly in Stamford, Connecticut. His family was active in the Salvation Army, instilling in Eugene at an early age a sense of duty to others. He is described by his sister Leslie as an active, engaged young man viewed as a leader by his friends. He enlisted during his senior year in high school at age 17, requiring the permission of his parents. His family nickname was Pumpkin due to his complexion and round face. He was initially stationed in Germany, but extended for duty in Vietnam. Arriving in country, he was assigned as a rifleman with Company C. He was remembered as a bright, friendly soldier whose ability to procure anything needed was seen to be truly magical. That led to his Army nickname, Magic, which was more appropriate in the platoon than Pumpkin. One of his fellow soldiers, Dennis Dockery, remembered Gene as someone who was always thinking of others. He told me magic was personable and likable when he wanted to be, although it was more often quiet and mysterious. His most fond memories were of his incredible ability to come up with the most basic items when nobody else had any, nor could they imagine where he came up with these supplies. When we were dying for a cigarette, or more likely a match or a lighter, somehow or other, we would hear this little giggle from Magic, and saying nothing, he would hold forth a fresh pack of cool cigarettes, which was a favorite of all of us, or a lit lighter, period. In fact, we would ask where the heck he got these things, and he would just giggle again and add, "It must be magic." The platoon spent the night of June 18th to 19th around the Hockman Bridge, spanning the Rock-Tra stream southeast of Saigon. In the morning, the company's assignment was to stop and search the stream of civilians on the road, which was heavy even though there were no villages or markets in the area to explain the foot traffic. The company was then eagle-flighted or airlifted by 5 slicks to an area of swampy grassland called the Hockman Estates. They LZ'd into a field about 20 yards from a tree line and almost immediately began receiving AK and RPG fire, which hit several soldiers and the Hueys. The choppers took off and the company was pinned down. Any movement brought sustained and accurate fire. They lay in the grass and water, unable to effectively return fire or retrieve their wounded. The area had been heavily bombed, and the best cover was the water-filled bottoms of the craters, but very few men could reach them, and those that could brought fire upon themselves if they did try to fight back. The radio was knocked out by either hostile fire or immersion in the water. The platoon was immobilized by relentless VC fire. Any movement brought an instant response. At some point through the morning, Eugene was hit in the shoulder. He was in the open and unreachable by his fellow soldiers. Still, he called out, not for help for himself, but for his fallen comrades. He tried to give their location and condition, but after a short while, his voice was stilled. The platoon, through the rest of that afternoon, had only their own weapons with which to defend themselves until Alpha and Delta companies began to arrive. Alpha landed in a hot LZ, but Delta was luckier and was able to begin a sweep down the stream and push back the VC. They had a working radio, and soon gunships arrived and were able to bring accurate fire on the tree line, as well as dropping tear gas and concealing smoke. The survivors of Eugene's platoon were at last able to withdraw to the relative safety of a haystack and a low berm. But it was only until after a night assault was launched that the dead and wounded could be retrieved. The platoon had taken over 70% casualties. The men of the 2nd Platoon C Company, 1st to the 27th, upheld the finest traditions of their regiment, the Wolfhounds. They fought alone to the limit of their abilities against a superior force until relieved. Eugene Magic Mansell volunteered for Vietnam, leaving a safe assignment in Germany to fight. He was not ordered to do it, he chose to do it. He embodies the best qualities of the American fighting man. Thank you for your attention, for being here today to honor Eugene and the other Connecticut soldiers. I'd like to say I'm indebted to Eugene's sister Leslie, who's here today, and to Dennis Dockery, a member of the 2nd Platoon, for sharing Eugene's story.
I would like to welcome up our State Senator Carl Leone to talk about Lance Corporal Norman Spinard.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is really and truly a beautiful day, even more so for such a wonderful event. And before I get a chance to say some very good words about Lance Corporal Norman Spinard, I just wanted to take a few moments to say a few words on my behalf as well as the state of Connecticut. I want to say thank you to everyone here for being here on such a wonderful occasion. One of the things I get to do as a state official is attend many events. But every time I get a chance to attend an event for our veterans or for the families of our veterans, even more so for those who have given the ultimate sacrifice, it's always and simply just an honor to be here. It's something that I always look forward to do because we can't do it enough, and it shouldn't just happen around Veterans Day, it should be every day. So I just want to say thank you to everyone here. I want to thank the mayor, Mayor Chatfield, for having us here in Prospect, beautiful location. I want to thank Connecticut Fallen Heroes, the staff, the ladies who do a wonderful, the quilts, Sikorsky for sponsoring, and to all those who have been here. And if I have learned anything while I get to do these events, by honoring those who have fallen and honoring their families, we realize that they're never truly gone. And that's what makes it important. And number two, what I've also learned is that when we are together in these kind of occasions, you are never alone because you have each other. We have each other. And I think the comments from Chief Warrant Allen was very nicely said. It put a fine point on who we need to be as Americans to be united. And more importantly, it wasn't politically correct. It was just correct. Those words were correct. So let me talk a little bit about Norman Shepherd. He was born in the Springdale section of Stamford on December 31st, 1945. He was the son of Armand and Helen Langlis Spinard. Norman attended St. John's Parochial School in Stamford, and he went on to attend Stamford Catholic High School, graduating in 1964. He was described by all who knew him as a mature, family-oriented young man. His sister Vivian DeLeo said that although he was a quiet young man, he did have a quirky sense of humor. She recalled that her entire neighborhood got a kick out of the fact that when he did his paper route, he would often walk his pet squirrel on a leash. And she added that he always wanted to be a Marine. Must have been the nuts. I'm Air Force, so I get to say that. Immediately after high school, Norman entered the United States Marine Corps and left for Vietnam in August 1965. While in Vietnam, he served with the 2nd Battalion, 1st Marine Regiment, and participated in several campaigns, including Operation Highland and Operation Dagger Thrust. Late in 1965, Lance Corporal Spinard was assigned to the USS Iwo Jima, and then later the US Valley Forge, where he took part in several helicopter counterinsurgency missions. During Operation Dagger Thrust, Spinard was part of a landing team of about 1,000 Marines deployed on a 2-day mission that began at Phu Tu Village, about 40 miles north of Quai Nam. During his time aboard the Valley Forge, he crossed paths with his best friends from back home, Mike Harding. Back home, we used to play pickup games on the street all day long, said Harding, and we would wait for each other after school. The two were together on the ship for several months. On the morning of December 5th, 1965, Spenard departed the Valley Forge for a mission in Quinnon. Harding, who was on watch that morning, remembers that day clearly. I helped him pack his bags, and he flew off. I said, "I'll see you later." I never did. Although the mission that day was deemed a success, with 26 enemy soldiers killed and 38 captured, Spenard was killed in a firefight with enemy forces. At the time of his death, Lance Corporal Spenard was only 19 years old. He was born on the same day and in the same hospital suite as his fellow Marine, Richard Broadhurst, who was killed just 4 months earlier. Norman was survived by both his parents and by two sisters, Susan Spenard Kozak and Vivian Spenard DeLeo. For his service, he was posthumously awarded the Purple Heart, the Vietnam Service Medal with 1 Bronze Star, the Republic of Vietnam Campaign Ribbon, the Republic of Vietnam Gallantry Cross, the United States National Defense Service Medal, and 2 Gold Star lapel buttons. Perhaps no one captured the spirit of Norman better than his aunt, Miss Andrea Spenard, who in her poem, "The Bravest of Men," she wrote, "Hundreds around me, yet I'm alone. For the battle I fought was my very own. I fought for my folks who were far away, fought bravely and well, men will say, nor did I fight in vain. I will live in the hearts of men who fought for the right again and again. I will be in the thoughts of those who pray for the men who gave their lives today. Nor did I fight in vain. And in years to come, you will find I still live on in the hearts and mind of all those I loved and all those I knew. I fought for all, but mostly for you. Nor did I fight in vain." I think that eloquence says it all. Thank you very much. God bless you. And thank you to the family of Norman Spenard.
Let's give one more round of applause for all our honorees this year and their families. I'd like to welcome back Oyarma Tate for his presentation of his self-written poem, A Veteran's Prayer.
uncovered. Let us pray. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Of whom then shall I fear? Though an army encamp against me, my heart shall not be afraid. Though war rise against me, yet will I be confident and steadfast. We join together in prayer for all veterans of foreign wars, those who have given their lives to protect our waters and our shores. As we honor their courage and cherish their memory, may we put our faith in the one who is a source of life and hope now and always. We give thanks and honor for the courage of those brave men and women who are currently serving our armed forces throughout the world. As we have learned from the past, our troops know what it means to sacrifice. And our prayer is that they will be comforted and strengthened by their faith. We pray for those who have been maimed during the war and those who now have to adjust to new and sometimes difficult ways of life. In times of difficulty and pain, may they be supported by our love and service. We also pray for the families of servicemen and women who cope at home while their loved ones are involved in war in other parts of the world. While peace is our goal, our Lord's example shows us that we must work with love and courage to attain peace by confronting and acting to eliminate those issues and circumstances which prevent peace. Realizing that such confrontation and action may initially expose disagreement, discord, public disturbance, and even wars, we pray, O God, that you will bless us with strength and courage to work and act so that your peace may reign throughout the world. Finally, we pray that all people will begin to show love and respect for each other and learn to live in peace. Amen.
Mansell to sing the Battle Hymn of the Republic. If you know, please sing after the first verse.
God be with Frank, Charles, and Oyarma. And Ralph, Fergus, my brother Eugene, and Norman are with God, and we thank them all for their service. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is tramping out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He hath loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. In the beauty of the lilies, Christ was born across the sea, with a glory in his bosom that transfigures you and me. As he died to make men holy, let us die to make men free. While God is marching on. Glory, 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 hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching
Now we'd like to welcome Rebecca Sperano from the Sikorsky Legal Department from Home Run for Heroes.
Good afternoon. I'm Rebecca Sperano from Sikorsky Aircraft, a Lockheed Martin company. For the past 9 years, Sikorsky Aircraft, with the Teamsters Local 1150 and over 100 volunteers from Sikorsky Aircraft, host Home Run for Heroes. This baseball event honors veterans and benefits 4 local veteran organizations. Connecticut Veterans Legal Center, which assists veterans with legal issues, the Harkness House, which assists male veterans with transitional housing, and Female Soldiers Forgotten Heroes, which assists female soldiers with transitional housing. And it also benefits Connecticut Fallen Heroes. On behalf of the Sikorsky Aircraft, the Teamsters Local 1150, and over 100 Sikorsky volunteers, we thank Connecticut Fallen Heroes for recognizing veterans and honoring those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice. To continue to help with the work that Connecticut Fallen Heroes does, I'd like to present to the Connecticut Fallen Heroes organization a check in the amount of $11,700. Thank you. May God bless each of you that are here today, and may God bless America. Thank you.
And now we'd like to take this moment to not just recognize our honorees from this year, but our honorees from the past 14 years right now, and I'd like to welcome Lily up here to help me do that. If you are here representing one of these fallen heroes, please come up and take a token of our appreciation as well. Private Cheyenne Seymour, U.S. Army, Trumbull, Connecticut. Senior Airman Guillermo Nazaro, U.S. Air Force, Bridgeport. Corporal Jordan Pearson, U.S. Marine Corps, Milford, Connecticut. Private First Class Nicholas Medeiros, Wilton, Connecticut. Lance Corporal Philip Johnson, U.S. Marine Corps, Enfield, Connecticut. Private First Class Stephen Richardson, U.S. Army, Bridgeport, Connecticut. Petty Officer Third Class Nathan Brunkenthal, U.S. Coast Guard, Ridgeford, Connecticut. Specialist Tiana Avery Felder, U.S. Army, Bridgeport, Connecticut. Captain Jason Hamill, U.S. Army, Salem, Connecticut. Lance Corporal Lawrence Philippon, U.S. Marine Corps, West Hartford, Connecticut. Specialist Wilfredo Perez Jr., U.S. Army, Norwalk, Connecticut. Staff Sergeant Martin Troy, U.S. Army Air Force, Norwalk, Connecticut. Corporal Stephen Bixler, U.S. Marine Corps, Suffield, Connecticut. First Lieutenant Thomas Brown, U.S. Army, Shelton, Connecticut. Sergeant David Coulard, U.S. Marine Corps, Glastonbury, Connecticut. Corporal Kevin Jack Dempsey, U.S. Marine Corps, Monroe, Connecticut. Staff Sergeant Richard Eaton, Jr., U.S. Army, Guilford, Connecticut. Captain Brian S. Latendre, U.S. Marine Corps, New Britain, Connecticut. Staff Sergeant Joseph Fanoff, II, U.S. Army, Eastford, Connecticut. Sergeant Felix Greco, U.S. Army, Simsbury, Connecticut. Chief Warrant Officer William Brennan, U.S. Army, Woodbury, Connecticut. Operations Specialist Seaman Tyler Connolly, U.S. Navy, Glastonbury, Connecticut. Sergeant Benjamin Gilman, U.S. Army, Meriden, Connecticut. Warrant Officer Michael Kite, U.S. Army, Waterbury, Connecticut. Chief Petty Officer Jason Lewis, U.S. Navy, Brookfield, Connecticut. Lieutenant Michael Murphy, U.S. Navy, Patriquay, is that right? Patriquay, New York. That's from New York, I should know that. Corporal On, U.S. Marine Corps, Waterford, Connecticut. Chief Warrant Officer Richard Lee, U.S. Army, Wallingford, Connecticut. Sergeant Ronald Howard, U.S. Army, Bethany, Connecticut. Staff Sergeant Ronald Cardona, U.S. Army, Gardner, Massachusetts. Private First Class Kyle Kuchu, U.S. Marine Corps, Providence, Rhode Island. Specialist Andre Craig Jr., U.S. Army, New Haven, Connecticut. Private First Class Anthony D'Agostino, U.S. Army, Waterbury, Connecticut. Private First Class Melissa Hobart, U.S. Army, East Haven, Connecticut. Sergeant Stephen DeLuzzo, U.S. Army, Glastonbury, Connecticut. Specialist David Fahey, Jr., U.S. Army, Norwalk, Connecticut. Sergeant First Class Daehan Park, U.S. Army, Watertown, Connecticut. Sergeant Robert Elia, U.S. Army, Shelton, Connecticut. Private First Class Gebra Noonan, U.S. Army, Watertown, Connecticut. Staff Sergeant Vincent Stabile, U.S. Army, Bronx, New York. Special Warfare Operator Chief Brian Bill, U.S. Navy, Stamford, Connecticut. Private First Class Eric Sofreen, U.S. Army, Waterford, Connecticut. Staff Sergeant Edwin Rivera, U.S. Army, Waterford, Connecticut. Sergeant Robert Leska, U.S. Army, Trumbull, Connecticut. Sergeant Joseph Nolan, U.S. Army, Waterbury, Connecticut. Private First Class Thomas Donovan, U.S. Army, Norwich, Connecticut. Lance Corporal Tyler Griffin, U.S. Marine Corps, Voluntown, Connecticut. Lieutenant Junior Guard Michael DiBartolomeo, U.S. Navy, Stamford, Connecticut. Corporal Jacob Latour, U.S. Marine Corps, Waterbury, Connecticut. Corporal Frank Navarro, U.S. Army, West Haven, Connecticut. Captain Andrew Peterson Kell, U.S. Army, Madison, Connecticut. Specialist 4, Philip Rumaniski, U.S. Army, Highland Falls, New York. Specialist Diver Robert Stetham, U.S. Navy, Waterbury, Connecticut. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Stores, U.S. Air Force, Ozen Park, Queens, New York. Lance Corporal Lester Atherton, U.S. Marine Corps, Bridgeport, Connecticut. Private First Class Lenwood Harrell, U.S. Army, Waterbury, Connecticut. Specialist Robert Hoyt, U.S. Army, Ashford, Connecticut. Private First Class William Mastrani, U.S. Army, Stratford, Connecticut. Specialist 4, Robert Tilquest, U.S. Army, New Haven, Connecticut. Senior Master Sergeant Andre Gailey, U.S. Air Force, Waterbury, Connecticut. Electronics Tech, 2nd Class, Dustin Doyon, U.S. Navy, Suffield, Connecticut. Intelligence Tech, 1st Class, Corey Ingram, U.S. Navy, Poughkeepsie, New York. Intelligence Tech, 1st Class, Timothy Eccles, Jr., U.S. Navy, Manchester, Maryland. Specialist 4, Ralph Sinati, U.S. Army, Bridgeport, Connecticut. Corporal Fergus Connors, U.S. Army, Stamford, Connecticut. Private Eugene Mansell, U.S. Army, Hartford, Connecticut. Lance Corporal Norman Spinard, U.S. Marine Corps, Stamford, Connecticut. I'd like to take this moment to invite back our Post 8075 from the Prospect VFW to retire our colors. Thank you all so much for coming to celebrate this day of honor, remembrance, and sacrifice. If you'd all like to join us on the terrace for the release of our false doves, we'd like to do that now before we come back for our raffle drawings.
Everyone can make their way outside for the dove release, please. And just to let everyone know, they are biodegradable. There's literature on it. They did their research. So that is the reason we are letting them go today. Rita, whenever you're ready, when everyone gets outside, take it away.
Ready? Is everybody out? All right.